All right, good morning, everyone. So welcome to your first asynchronous video. So I know it's a long time coming, but I wanted to really make sure that you guys knew what you guys were getting into. So these videos are going to be short and sweet, so let's get right into it. So first off, rough idea. This video is all about just giving you the first look. It's not meant for you to really understand the topic, but it's for you to just get the big picture. The way you're going to understand the main topic is when you guys are actually in class and practicing and watching the example video. So if this is the only video you're watching, you're probably really good at math and you just get things the first try. But if you're the type of person that needs examples, that needs to be shown multiple times, then use the fact that they're videos to your advantage and just watch the ones that you really need help with. So a couple of quick reminders. This isn't meant to replace a lesson, but it's really meant to just explain it the first time. So this should be watched before you get into lesson. And so once you get into lesson, you're like, oh, okay, that's what they were talking about in the video. Please take notes on it. It's not just one of those things that you just kind of passively watch through. They're all about big ideas. Next, this is, again, a starting place. So this isn't where you end, and this isn't like, well, as long as I watch the video, I'm fine. No, this is a chance for you to take your learning into your hands. The more you do this, the better you'll get at understanding how to learn from these short lessons. But again, as I've mentioned a lot of times, this is all about introducing topics. So one of the things that we're going to be doing today is we're going to be focusing on a review of all the things that we've covered so far, as well as an expansion on one topic. So first off, you guys need to know how to do gems. There were 3 key things that we learned. The first was gems. Gems was all about order of operations. And basically, gems was your replacement of PEMDAS. What gems stood for was grouping, exponents, multiplication, and subtraction. Now, it's really easy and really simple. When you see problems like this, basically all you have to do is you say, what comes first? Do I do groupings, exponents, multiplication, or subtraction? This is my order, so where's my groupings? And you see the parentheses there, so that's what you're going to be focusing on. You're going to say, hey, let's work on this first. So ignore everything else. That's what GEM says. It says find what goes first and ignore everything else. So you can zoom in, you can underline, or one of the things that I did was this is G, this is M, whoops, sorry, let me put this down here, M, and then this is A, or also S. Addition and subtraction are the same, multiplication or division are the same. That's why we're using GEMS instead of PEMDAS. It reminds us that multiplication and division are basically interchangeable. We're going to be talking about that a little bit more in chapter 2, but for now, just keep that in the back of your mind. Now, in the description, there's going to be a video talking about examples like this. But again, the big picture is that GEMS is your order of operations. It tells you how to do problems like this, and it tells you what to focus on first. If you're having trouble, make sure that you're labeling things out. Again, if you're having difficulty with problems like this, or if you see the second problem, you're like, I have no idea how to do it, make sure you watch the extended video below where I'm going to be giving you guys example problems specifically on this. Again, that's going to be called the GEMS example video. All right, next. The next thing that we went over is how to deal with negatives, GEMS with negatives. Now, unfortunately, we didn't get to go over this in class with everyone, but basically the main thing is you have to think of negatives as adjectives or separate to the number. So for example, we can have things like, I have -3. That's saying I have a negative version of the 3, and we have to separate it. So when we're doing addition or subtraction, for example, saying things like -3 plus 5 means I have a negative version and I'm adding a +5 to it. But when we're multiplying, that's where it gets a little bit more important, where we're saying I have a -2 times a +4. What happens when I multiply a negative number by a positive number? And that's saying, hey, we're going to have a negative number, and more on that in, again, our extended videos. Our extended video is going to be below. But basically, the biggest thing to think of with GEMS is just one extra, negatives is one extra step to GEMS, and it's just one extra complexity that we're adding onto it. And the biggest thing is just think of negatives and positives as separate to our GEMS, because it's just one extra thing we have to think about with another set of rules. So again, you see a big problem that looks kind of like this, and it's really long, except there's a bunch of negatives in there. That's where you start to say, okay, let's break this down and focus one thing at a time. Math is all about just finding your focus. Okay. There were a few rules that we learned. The first rule is that when we're adding negatives, the main thing we're going to be doing is we're switching from addition to subtraction. So in this first one here, we have 5 plus negative 3. It's the same as writing 5 minus 3. That negative says, hey, let's change this operation here. Next, when I am subtracting, it says, let's switch it to addition. Again, that negative says, switch your adding or subtracting operation. That was one of our rules that we learned. The next rule that we learned was when we're multiplying, it reverses the adjective of our number. So if I started off as a positive number like positive 5 times negative 3 is negative 15 because it's a negative number now. Similarly, when I have a positive number times... Sorry, that was my alarm to stop recording. So much for professionalism. For example, though, if I have a negative 7 times negative 12, what that tells me is I start off as a negative, but that second negative I'm multiplying says we switch the sign. Again, all it does is the negative just adds a set of rules. In multiplication, it says take whatever number you started with and change it from positive to negative. Again, if you're still a little confused, there's going to be an example video in the description, so you make sure you check that out. Okay, finally, when we're dealing with parentheses, parentheses help us keep track of what our operations are, as well as they help group our negatives. So for example, if I have a problem like this, negative 7 times by 5 minus 8, we first focus on what's inside our grouping symbols. So we do 5 minus 8, which you guys should know is negative 3. So here we have negative 7 times negative 3. This is correct. However, this one is wrong. If we just drop our parentheses, it's easy to make it look like it's negative 7 minus 3. And maybe you guys won't make that mistake 5 times out of 10, but still that's a 50% hit rate and it's not very great. Even if you don't make that mistake 8 times out of 10, that's still an 80% hit rate. And that's still a chance for you to lose points that you shouldn't be losing. So make sure that you guys are watching out for this. Again, when you're dealing with negative, there were 3 big rules. Number 1, when you're adding or subtracting, the negative tells you to swap your operations from addition to subtraction and backwards. When you're multiplying, it says whatever your first number was, it's now the opposite. If it was a positive, it's now a negative. If it was a negative, it's now a positive. Okay, the last thing that we learned was translating. We also talked about inequalities a little bit, so I'm going to be focusing on both of those things here. So when we're translating, the main thing is you have to be focused on vocabulary. So make sure that you guys are knowing what does it mean to be a sum, a difference, a product, inequalities and expressions and sentences versus equations, right? Knowing all of these things are important because when we're translating, we have to know what the word is before we can translate. One of the big new words that we talked about was the word quantity. Quantity means group everything that comes next. So if I say something like 3 times the quantity of a number minus 15, what it's saying is 3 times parentheses, chuck whatever comes next in a parentheses. So it's 3 parentheses x minus 15. And the reason why that's multiplication is because if there's no operation in between, that means it's just operation by default. Okay. Finally, we're going to be talking about inequalities. The main thing with inequalities is they focus on which side was bigger. Okay. The underline in your inequality symbol means that the two sides could possibly be equal. So and there are certain keywords as well. For example, at least means the left side is bigger than or equal to the right. So if I say something like 5 is at least 3. What that means is that 5 side should be at least 3. Now, that's obvious, but for example, we say things like a movie ticket should be at least $12. That means the movie ticket is bigger than $12 or it's the same as $12. And again, when you're stuck, that's always a good way to kind of change it. So you can say like, okay, a movie ticket is at most, or instead of saying something like x plus 5 is at most. It makes it a lot more easier when you're translating it to English. That's why it's so important to know that English and math are kind of connected here. All right, so in summary, here's what you guys are going to need to know. So first off, you guys need to know gems. You need to know how to deal with gems with negatives. You need to know how to deal with inequalities as well as translating. Now, there are extra explanation videos in the bottom for each of these sections, so make sure you guys are checking that out. And make sure you guys come in for help on your homework because the homework I posted, you should be using this to help you guys out with it. And again, this is a first look. The way we're doing it here is a little bit different. Not all videos are going to be formatted like this, but they all will be really short, not over explaining, just kind of giving you the main general idea. So that way when you're doing practice problems, you guys will be like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Okay, You do have a quiz this Friday, and so you also will have a new lessons on video kind of like this with extended videos in the description box. Your test that's going to include the new videos is going to be next week, Friday. So make sure that you're using Rider Time to get help, as well as messaging me on Remind and on email. The pace of the class is going to move up a lot more now that we're done with our first week. All right, thank you for sitting through the first video. Again, if you're a little confused, that's totally fine, because this is just meant to be an introduction/overview video. The way that you guys get good is by watching your example videos. See you guys there. Make sure you check out the description.